The formed aluminum gear that come with the timber just looked to be a little bit undersized for this big a plane. Hangar 9 apparently suspected that we'd think like that, so they built in some hard points for a different kind of landing gear. This is the optional suspended undercarriage that we can get for this plane. The only problem here is that people think these springs are just too strong. We've also heard that they can stretch out on a hard landing. Plus, we just can't leave well enough alone. A friend of mine, Dennis Shaver, has been replacing springs with these bungees, and it works really well. So we got him to show us how he does it. I don't know why I thought I could clip these springs off with a side cutter, but as you might suspect, that ain't gonna happen. These are good side cutters, and I had everything I could do just to make a dent in the spring. But me being a guy and all, I had more tools. There was very little tension on these springs with the struts closed, so there was no release of energy when I cut the end off. We had to cut the ends off because they had squeezed the end shut around the nuts that they welded to the strut. Eventually I won and got all the springs off of the struts. Right near some places where I noticed all the paint that had built up on the threads inside of those nuts. We got to clean that out because we want to use them. I found out my nuts had a 4mm thread, but I've heard that some are 3mm, so make sure you check that. I ran the tap in and out a couple of times and I cleaned up the threads nicely. These are 25mm long bolts, and I put some thread lock on them at the nuts just to hold them in place. My friend Dennis did the trial and error on this and figured out that 4 10-inch pieces of 1/8-inch bungee cord work great on each strut. After cutting, melt the ends of the bungee a little bit, and that keeps them from fraying. I used a little hobby vise to hold the ends of the bungee so I could wrap the wire around them and get that started. A needle nose pliers makes getting this started a bunch easier. You really can take your time and do all this with just a plain pliers, but where's the fun in that? This is like the little brother of the safety wire pliers that I used to use when the government let me take care of some of its helicopters, and it's purpose designed just for this use. One thing to keep in mind when you're using one of these pliers is that the tighter you make that twist, the more it squeezes on the bungees, and you can actually cut the bungees off. When you see the wire sinking into the bungees, that's plenty. It's not going anywhere. Then we cut off the excess, leaves about a 1/4-inch tail, and bend that down in between the ends of the bungee. We put the tails of the bungee in the middle, loop the bungee over both bolts on that side, twist it 180 degrees, and loop it over the bolts on the other side. Trying to do this and keep it in the frame of the camera at the same time is really difficult. Just putting it on isn't so bad. Do it right and you get this little X-looking deal. And you'll find that the first one is the hardest to do because the ends of the struts keep trying to turn. We put 2 bungees on this side of the bolts and then 2 bungees on the other side of the bolts. When you get all 4 bungees on a strut, we use some small tie wraps just to hold the bungees down on the bolts. We don't need to pull them real tight. The tie wraps just guarantee that the bungee can't pop off of the bolts when you bounce the plane off the ground and the strut slams shut. Dennis more or less ordered me to strip all the covering off of my gear, sand them down, and paint them black. The red covering on the gear didn't match the red on the plane real close, and this looks better. Now with all that space between the tubings exposed, maybe it'll hum or something when it goes through the air.